Hello, dear traveler. Tonight, I'm so glad you've joined me for another quiet journey across our remarkable planet. Find a comfortable spot, pull a soft blanket close, and take a deep, slow breath. We're leaving the noise of the world behind and heading to a place where time moves differently. A place of secrets older than mountains, where water whispers stories millions of years old. Welcome to Lake Baikal, Earth's oldest and deepest lake, hidden in the heart of Siberia. Imagine standing at its edge, the air crisp and cold, stars shimmering above as still waters mirror the night sky. Beneath those glassy depths lies a history older than humanity itself. Stay with me, and we'll uncover the quiet magic of this ancient jewel together. Now let's begin. Imagine, if you can, traveling back through time. Not years, not centuries, but millions upon millions of years. Picture our planet as it was 25 million years ago, when the continents were still finding their places, when the very ground beneath our feet was restless and alive with geological dreams. It was during this ancient epoch that something extraordinary began to happen in what would one day become the heart of Siberia. The Earth in those distant times was a planet in constant, gentle transformation. The great mountain ranges we know today were still rising, the climate was warmer and more tropical than it is now, and life was experimenting with new forms in the warm seas and emerging grasslands. But deep beneath the surface, in the patient darkness of the Earth's interior, forces were stirring that would create one of our planet's most remarkable features. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, massive tectonic plates were engaged in their slow, patient dance, a choreography that had been unfolding since the birth of our planet. These colossal pieces of the Earth's crust, each carrying the weight of continents, were pulling apart with imperceptible gentleness, creating what geologists call a rift valley. Think of it as the Earth itself taking a deep, slow breath, stretching and creating space for something magnificent to be born. The forces involved in this process are almost beyond human comprehension. Imagine the pressure required to move continents, the heat generated by friction between massive rock formations, the patient work of time measured not in human lifespans, but in geological epochs. Yet for all their immensity, these forces worked with surprising gentleness, creating change so gradual that it unfolded like a meditation in stone and time. This wasn't a violent tearing, mind you, but rather a gradual, almost meditative process that unfolded over eons. Year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium, the land slowly separated along what we now know as the Baikal Rift Zone. It's as if the Earth was carefully sculpting a masterpiece, taking its time to create something that would endure long after the forces that shaped it had quieted. The rift that was forming wasn't unique in the world. Similar processes were creating other great valleys and lakes around the globe. But something special was happening here in Siberia. The particular configuration of rock layers, the specific angle of the continental plates, the precise balance of forces, all combined to create conditions that would give birth to something unprecedented in the freshwater world. As this gentle separation continued, something beautiful began to happen. The depression that formed, this gradually deepening valley, began to fill with water. At first it might have been just small pools collecting rainwater and the gentle runoff from surrounding hills. Picture these early waters, perhaps no larger than ponds, sitting quietly in the growing depression, reflecting the ancient sky above and beginning the long process of becoming something extraordinary. But as millions of years passed, these waters grew deeper, wider, more substantial. Rivers began to find their way to this growing body of water, each one contributing its own gift of fresh, clear water to what was becoming a lake of unprecedented size and depth. The Selenga River, which even today provides more than half of the water flowing into Lake Baikal, was among the first to discover this growing depression and begin the patient work of filling it. The process was so slow, so patient, that if we could have watched it unfold, it would have seemed like a meditation in geological time. Mountains rose around the growing lake, their slopes gentle and protective, as if they understood they were guardians of something precious. These weren't just any mountains. They were ancient, weathered peaks that had seen the very dawn of complex life on Earth. The Sayan Mountains to the north, with their rounded peaks and gentle valleys, stood like ancient sentinels watching over the growing lake. To the west, the Primorsky Range lifted its rocky spine, creating a barrier that would protect the lake from the harsh winds of western Siberia. The Barguzin Range to the east, with its mixture of granite peaks and forested slopes, provided another wall of protection. And to the south, the Kamar-Daban Mountains completed the circle, creating a natural amphitheater around this growing miracle of water. Each of these mountain ranges has its own character, its own geological story. The rocks that form them tell tales of ancient seas, volcanic eruptions, and the slow compression of sediments into stone. Some of these rocks are among the oldest on Earth, formed when our planet was still young, and the first simple life forms were just beginning to experiment with existence in the primordial oceans. What makes this story even more remarkable is that Lake Baikal is still growing, still deepening, still evolving. The same forces that gave birth to it 25 million years ago are still at work today, though at a pace so gentle we can barely detect it. The lake grows wider by about 2 centimeters each year, a pace so gradual that it speaks to the patience of geological time, where change is measured not in human lifespans, but in the slow breathing of the Earth itself. This ongoing expansion means that Lake Baikal is not a relic of the past, but a living, growing feature of our planet. Every year, the lake becomes slightly larger, slightly deeper, as the forces that created it continue their patient work. Sensitive instruments can detect the tiny earthquakes that accompany this expansion, gentle tremors that remind us that the earth beneath our feet is never truly still. During these millions of years, Baikal has been a silent witness to the most extraordinary chapters in our planet's history. It watched as early mammals began to diversify and spread across the continents. It was there when the first grasses began to carpet the plains, fundamentally changing the Earth's ecosystems and creating the grasslands that would eventually support vast herds of grazing animals. The lake witnessed the great cooling that began about 15 million years ago, when the Earth's climate shifted from the warm, tropical conditions of the earlier Cenozoic era toward the cooler, more variable climate we know today. It saw the rise of the Himalayas and other great mountain ranges, watched as forests spread and retreated with changing climates, observed the evolution of countless species that lived and died around its growing shores. Through it all, the lake endured, growing deeper, growing clearer, becoming more magnificent with each passing epoch. Ice ages came and went like slow seasons in the Earth's great year, covering much of the northern hemisphere with vast sheets of ice. But Lake Baikal, protected by its depth and its unique circulation patterns, never froze completely. Even during the coldest periods in Earth's history, liquid water continued to flow in the depths of this ancient lake. The water that fills Baikal today isn't just any water. It's a repository of time itself. Some of the water molecules floating in its depths have been there for hundreds of years, slowly circulating in currents so gentle they seem like the lake's own form of breathing. This water has seen countless sunrises reflected on its surface, countless storms that stirred its depths, countless seasons of ice and warmth. Other water molecules are newcomers, arriving just yesterday or last week in the form of rain or snow, joining the ancient circulation that will carry them through the lake's depths for centuries to come. This mixing of old and new, ancient and fresh, creates a continuity that connects the present moment to the very origins of the lake itself. As we imagine this ancient lake in its infancy, growing slowly in its rocky cradle, we can almost feel the profound silence that must have surrounded it. Picture the stillness of those early mornings millions of years ago, when the lake's surface was as smooth as glass, reflecting clouds that drifted across skies that had never known the contrails of aircraft, never heard the sound of human voices. This was a world of pure geology and pure water, of time moving at the pace of mountain building and valley carving. The only sounds would have been the gentle lapping of water against stone shores, the distant calls of ancient birds, the rustle of primitive forests in the wind. It was a world where patience was not a virtue, but a fundamental law of existence, where all change happened slowly, deliberately, with the kind of care that can only come from having endless time. The indigenous peoples who would eventually come to live along Baikal's shores understood this sense of deep time intuitively. They called the lake Baikal, which means rich, fire, or rich lake, recognizing something sacred and powerful in its ancient waters. To them, this wasn't just a body of water. It was a living entity, a sacred presence that had been blessed by the spirits with extraordinary longevity and purity. Their oral traditions, passed down through countless generations, speak of the lake as having always existed, as being one of the fundamental features of the world, like the sky or the mountains. In their understanding, the lake was not created at a specific moment, but had always been part of the fabric of existence, growing and changing but never truly beginning, because it was woven into the very structure of reality itself. Even today, scientists studying Baikal speak of it with a reverence that goes beyond mere academic interest. They recognize that they're studying not just a lake, but a living chronicle of our planet's history. The sediments at the bottom of Baikal contain layers upon layers of time, each stratum telling a story of climate changes, volcanic eruptions, and the slow evolution of life itself. Core samples taken from these depths reveal records that go back millions of years. Pollen from long-extinct forests, volcanic ash from eruptions that occurred before mammals ruled the earth, the microscopic shells of organisms that lived and died when the lake was young. Reading these layers is like reading the autobiography of our planet, written in mud and time and preserved in the patient depths of this ancient lake. In these quiet depths lie records of ancient weather patterns, evidence of massive volcanic eruptions that temporarily darkened the sky, traces of meteor impacts that shook the entire planet. The sediments hold the story of how life itself evolved and changed, recording the rise and fall of countless species, the gradual shift from simple to complex organisms, the patient work of evolution crafting the diversity of life we see today. What strikes me most profoundly about Baikal's origin story is its patience. In our fast-paced world, where we measure time in minutes and hours, where we grow impatient if our devices take more than a few seconds to respond, there's something deeply soothing about contemplating a lake that has been growing, slowly and steadily, for 25 million years. This ancient patience offers us a different way of understanding time and change. It reminds us that the most beautiful and enduring things in our world are often those that develop gradually, with care, with time. The great cathedrals of Europe took centuries to build. Great works of literature mature over years of careful revision. Deep friendships develop through decades of shared experience. In the same way, Lake Baikal achieved its extraordinary beauty and complexity through the patient work of millions of years. There's something almost meditative about contemplating these vast timescales. When we think about a lake that has been growing for 25 million years, our own concerns and anxieties naturally fall into perspective. The challenges we face in our daily lives, while real and important, exist within the context of these much larger cycles of change and growth. This doesn't diminish the importance of our human experiences. Rather, it places them within a larger context that can be both humbling and comforting. We are part of a story that is much larger than our individual lives, participants in a process of planetary evolution that has been unfolding for billions of years and will continue long after we are gone. The forces that created Lake Baikal, the slow movement of continents, the patient work of water and weather, the gradual building of mountains and the carving of valleys, these same forces are still at work today. The Earth is still changing, still growing, still creating new wonders even as it preserves ancient ones like this remarkable lake. As we rest here in our imagination on the shores of this ancient wonder, listening to the gentle lapping of waters that have been lapping against these shores for longer than we can truly comprehend, we can feel ourselves becoming part of something much larger than our individual lives, something that connects us to the very foundation of our planet's story. The water before us carries within it the memory of countless seasons, countless storms, countless moments of perfect calm. It has reflected the light of stars that have long since died, has felt the footsteps of creatures that exist now only as fossils, has witnessed changes so gradual and vast that they dwarf our human sense of time and scale. Yet somehow, in this moment of quiet contemplation, we become part of that story. Our breath mingles with the air that rises from the lake's surface. Our thoughts join the vast silence that surrounds these ancient waters. Our presence adds one more moment to the endless story that Lake Baikal has been telling for 25 million years. As dawn breaks over Lake Baikal, something magical happens that has been repeating itself for millions of mornings. The first light of day touches the water's surface, and suddenly the lake transforms into the most perfect mirror you can imagine. The sky above and the sky reflected below become so seamlessly joined that it's impossible to tell where heaven ends and earth begins. This is the daily miracle of Baikal, a lake so vast, so pristine, that it holds the entire dome of the sky in its gentle embrace. Standing on Baikal's shore in the early morning, you'd find yourself wrapped in a silence so complete it seems to have weight. The lake stretches before you like an inland sea, its surface so still that even the slightest breeze creates ripples that catch the light like scattered diamonds. The horizon disappears into a haze that makes the lake seem infinite, as if you're standing at the edge of a world made entirely of sky and water. The water is so clear, so remarkably transparent, that you might mistake it for air. Looking down into its depths, you can see 20, 30, sometimes even 40 meters down, as if you were peering through the purest crystal ever formed by nature. Schools of fish move through this liquid clarity like birds flying through an underwater sky, their shadows dancing on the sandy bottom far below. This extraordinary clarity isn't an accident. It's the result of millions of years of patient filtering. The water in Lake Baikal has been purified by time itself, cleaned by countless microscopic organisms that work tirelessly to keep their ancient home pristine. Every drop has been through nature's most sophisticated filtration system, emerging so pure that in many places you could dip your hands directly into the lake and drink water cleaner than what flows from most taps around the world. The secret to this incredible clarity lies in part with tiny crustaceans called Episcura baikalensis, which exist nowhere else on Earth. These microscopic filter feeders work around the clock, consuming bacteria and other particles that would otherwise cloud the water. Each individual organism is smaller than a pinhead, but collectively they process the entire volume of the lake, keeping it crystal clear through their constant, patient work. Picture yourself floating gently on this mirror-like surface on a calm summer evening. Above you, the sky deepens from pale blue to rich indigo, and one by one stars begin to appear. But here's where Baikal works its most enchanting magic. Those same stars appear below you as well, reflected with such perfect clarity that you find yourself floating not just on water, but suspended between two infinite skies. It's a sensation that has moved travelers to tears, this feeling of being held gently between earth and heaven, cradled in liquid starlight. The water is so still, so perfectly reflective, that you might reach out to touch what you think is a star above you, only to realize you're reaching toward the reflection of a star below. The boundary between up and down, between reality and reflection, dissolves entirely in these moments of perfect calm. The optical phenomena that occur on Lake Baikal are extraordinary in their beauty and variety. Temperature inversions create layers of air at different densities, bending light in ways that create mirages and strange visual effects. Distant mountains appear to float in the sky, islands seem to hover above the water's surface, and the shoreline itself can appear to undulate like a gentle wave frozen in time. The seasonal transformations of Lake Baikal are like watching the earth itself change its clothes. In summer, the lake wears robes of deepest blue, sometimes shifting to green, where rivers carry minerals from the surrounding mountains. The surface dances with light, creating patterns that hypnotize anyone patient enough to watch. The interplay of wind and water creates textures that change from moment to moment, sometimes smooth, as silk, sometimes rippled like corduroy, sometimes broken into countless tiny mirrors that scatter sunlight in all directions. Schools of fish create subtle movements beneath the surface, their shadows flickering like living thoughts in the lake's crystalline mind. The famous omul, a fish found only in Baikal and a few connected rivers, moves in silvery schools that catch the light like underwater auroras. Watching these fish swim through the clear water is like watching clouds drift through a liquid sky. But perhaps the most breathtaking transformation comes with winter's arrival. As temperatures drop and the Siberian winds begin their ancient songs across the water, something extraordinary happens. The surface of Baikal begins to freeze, but not in the way of ordinary lakes. This ice forms slowly, dramatically, creating formations that seem carved by master sculptors working with frozen light. The process of ice formation on Lake Baikal is a spectacle that few people have the privilege to witness. Because the lake is so large and deep, it cools slowly, and ice forms gradually from the shores inward. The first ice appears in the shallow bays and inlets, thin sheets of crystal that extend their reach a little further each day as temperatures drop. The ice of Lake Baikal is legendary among those who have witnessed it. Because the water is so pure, it freezes into sheets of perfect transparency, creating what locals call glass ice. Walking on this surface, when it's safe to do so, is like walking on solidified sky. You can look down through the ice and see into the depths below, watching fish swimming in their underwater world while you stand on what feels like a crystal ceiling above them. The thickness of this ice can reach more than a meter in the coldest winters, creating a surface strong enough to support trucks and even trains. During the early days of the Trans-Siberian Railway, trains actually crossed the frozen lake in winter, their passengers experiencing the surreal sensation of traveling across what appeared to be a vast sheet of crystal, while fish swam visible beneath their feet. When the wind blows across this ice, it creates music, haunting, ethereal sounds that carry across the frozen lake like the songs of sleeping giants. The ice itself becomes an instrument, resonating with the deep bass notes of settling and shifting, punctuated by the crystalline chimes of thermal expansion and contraction. Many visitors describe these sounds as otherworldly, as if the lake itself is singing lullabies to the frozen world above. The acoustic properties of the frozen lake are remarkable. Sounds travel across the ice with startling clarity and distance. A conversation held at one end of a bay can be heard clearly at the other end, carried by the ice like a natural telephone line. The cracking and groaning of the ice as it expands and contracts creates a symphony that plays throughout the winter months, a concert performed by the lake itself. The ice formations on Baikal are works of art that would make any sculptor weep with envy. Pressure ridges push up walls of crystal that sparkle in the sun like diamond ramparts. These formations, called hummocks by locals, can rise several meters high, creating an ice landscape that seems sculpted by fairy tale architects. Walking among these formations is like exploring a palace made entirely of frozen light, where every surface reflects and refracts the sun into thousands of tiny rainbows. These pressure ridges form when the ice expands and the immense sheets push against each other with tremendous force. The result is chaos frozen into beauty, jumbled blocks of crystal ice piled high in formations that catch and scatter light in spectacular displays. Some of these ridges extend for kilometers across the lake, creating walls of ice that divide the frozen surface into distinct regions. In some places, the ice forms perfect spheres, ice balls that wash up on shore like crystalline pearls scattered by some celestial jewelry maker. These formations occur when waves freeze in motion, creating perfect spheres of ice that roll gently along the shoreline, polished smooth by their own movement. Finding a beach covered in these ice pearls is like discovering a treasure trove left by winter spirits. The formation of these ice balls is a delicate process that requires just the right conditions. Waves must be the perfect size, the temperature must drop at exactly the right rate, and the wind must blow with just the right force. When all these conditions align, the result is magical. Thousands of perfect spheres of ice, each one unique, rolling gently in the shallow water like frozen eggs laid by some mythical creature. But Baikal's beauty isn't limited to its frozen seasons. Spring brings its own magic as the ice begins to break up, in a process locals call the spring awakening. The sound of ice cracking and shifting carries across the lake like thunder, but gentle thunder, as if the earth itself is stretching after a long winter's sleep. The ice doesn't simply melt, it breaks apart in massive sheets, some as large as city blocks, that float like crystal islands, slowly melting and returning their ancient water to the liquid embrace of the lake. The spring breakup is a time of dramatic beauty and constant change. The ice, which seemed so solid and permanent just weeks before, reveals its temporary nature as temperatures rise and the lake reclaims its liquid form. The process can be surprisingly rapid. A lake that was completely frozen can be largely ice-free within a matter of days when conditions are right. Summer transforms Baikal into a playground of light and movement. The water warms just enough to invite swimming, though it never loses its refreshing coolness, even in the height of summer. Surface temperatures might reach 16 degrees Celsius in the warmest areas, but the lake's vast depth means that even a short swim is an invigorating experience that connects you directly to these ancient waters. The surrounding taiga forest comes, alive with the green of countless trees, creating a frame of emerald around the lake's sapphire heart. Siberian pine, larch, birch, and aspen create a tapestry of greens that changes with the light and the seasons. In spring, the fresh green of new leaves creates an almost luminous backdrop to the lake's blue waters. In autumn, the deciduous trees burst into colors that rival any forest on earth, golds and reds and oranges that seem to set the entire shoreline ablaze. Wildflowers bloom along the shoreline in summer, purple lupines standing tall like natural exclamation points, yellow buttercups carpeting meadows with gold, and delicate white flowers whose names are known only to the botanists who study them and the local people who have walked these shores for generations. These wildflower meadows create natural gardens that stretch for kilometers along the lake's edge, their colors reflected in the clear water like scattered jewels. The sunsets over Lake Baikal deserve their own poetry. As the sun begins its descent toward the western mountains, the lake becomes a canvas for one of nature's most spectacular art shows. The water catches every shade of the setting sun: gold, orange, pink, purple, deep red, and holds these colors like liquid light. The surface becomes a shifting masterpiece, with colors flowing and blending as gentle waves carry the reflected sunset across miles of water. During these magical evening hours, the lake often becomes so still that every cloud, every mountain peak, every bird flying overhead is reflected with photographic precision. It's during these moments that you truly understand why the indigenous peoples considered Baikal sacred. There's something profoundly spiritual about standing beside water so clear, so perfectly reflective, that it seems to double the world, creating a realm where reality and reflection merge into something greater than either could be alone. The colors of sunset on Lake Baikal seem to have an extra dimension, a depth and richness that photographers struggle to capture and artists despair of reproducing. Perhaps it's the purity of the air above the lake, or the perfect clarity of the water itself, or some combination of factors unique to this place. But the sunsets here possess a quality that seems almost supernatural in its beauty. As the sun disappears behind the western mountains, the sky doesn't simply fade to black. Instead, it goes through a slow progression of colors that can last for hours in the long summer evenings. Deep purples and indigos spread across the sky, reflected perfectly in the still water below. Stars begin to appear, first one or two, then dozens, then thousands, until the entire dome of the sky is alive with light, and every point of light is duplicated in the lake's mirror surface. The optical phenomena that occur on Baikal would fascinate any student of physics, but they work their magic even on those who don't understand the science behind them. Mirages are common here, where the clear air and vast water surface create conditions perfect for bending light in mysterious ways. Distant shores seem to float above the water, mountains appear upside down in the sky, and islands hover like celestial bodies just above the horizon. The Fata Morgana, a complex form of mirage, sometimes appears over Lake Baikal, creating fantastic cities in the sky, complete with towers and spires that seem to rise from the water's surface. These apparitions can last for hours, creating landscapes that exist only in bent light, phantom architectures that appear solid and real, but dissolve at the slightest change in atmospheric conditions. Even the way light moves through Baikal's water is special. Because of its exceptional clarity, sunlight can penetrate deeper here than in almost any other natural body of water. Photographers and divers speak of an underwater world bathed in cathedral light, where sunbeams slant down through the crystal water like pillars of liquid light, supporting an aquatic heaven. Diving in Lake Baikal is an experience unlike any other. The visibility can extend for 50 meters or more, creating an underwater world that seems to stretch on forever. The light filtering down from above creates constantly shifting patterns on the lake bottom, a natural light show that plays across the sand and rocks like living art. This interplay of light and water, this dance between sky and lake, creates an atmosphere of profound peace that seems to slow time itself. Visitors often find themselves sitting by the shore for hours, not because they're bored or restless, but because they're entranced by the subtle, ever-changing beauty of light on water. It's meditation made visible, a natural mandala that shifts and flows while maintaining its essential serenity. The quality of light on Lake Baikal changes throughout the day in ways that reveal new aspects of the lake's beauty. Morning light is often soft and golden, creating gentle reflections that seem to glow from within. Midday brings harsh, brilliant illumination that reveals every detail of the lake's crystalline depths. Evening light is warm and mellow, painting the water in shades of amber and gold. But perhaps the most magical light comes just after sunset, in that brief period photographers call the blue hour. During these moments, the sky takes on a deep, even blue that is reflected perfectly in the lake's still surface. The water seems to glow with its own inner light, creating a sense of existing within a sphere of pure, blue luminosity. Moon reflections on Lake Baikal create their own special magic. On calm nights, the moon's path across the water stretches from shore to shore, a highway of silver light that seems solid enough to walk on. The full moon rising over the lake is a sight that has inspired poets and artists for generations, its light turning the water into a sheet of liquid silver that extends to the horizon. Beneath the mirror-like surface of Lake Baikal lies a world that challenges our very understanding of what a lake can be. If we could somehow drain all the water from Baikal and stand at its deepest point, we would find ourselves at the bottom of a chasm deeper than many mountain peaks are tall. At its greatest depth, Baikal plunges down 1,642 meters below the surface, a distance so profound that if you could take the Empire State Building and place it on the lake's bottom, its highest point would still be hundreds of meters underwater. But even these staggering numbers only hint at the true mystery of Baikal's depths. This isn't just deep water we're talking about. This is a vertical world, a liquid canyon that contains secrets we're only beginning to understand. The deepest parts of Lake Baikal exist in what scientists call the abyssal zone, a realm of eternal darkness where the pressure is crushing and the temperature hovers just above freezing, regardless of the season above. To truly appreciate what 1,642 meters means, imagine standing at the surface and dropping a stone into the water. That stone would fall through liquid darkness for nearly 5 minutes before finally coming to rest on the lake bottom. During its descent, it would pass through layers of water so distinct they might as well be different worlds entirely. Each layer has its own temperature, its own unique community of microscopic life, its own role in the complex ecosystem that makes Baikal unlike any other body of water on Earth. The journey of that falling stone would take it first through the epilimnion, the surface layer where sunlight penetrates and photosynthesis occurs. Here, the water is warm in summer, cool in winter, and constantly interacting with the atmosphere above. Microscopic algae drift in this sunlit realm, forming the base of the food web that supports all life in the lake. As the stone continues its descent, it would pass through the thermocline, a transition zone where temperature drops rapidly with depth. This layer acts like a barrier, separating the warm surface waters from the cold depths below. Many organisms spend their entire lives in this transition zone, adapted to its unique conditions of intermediate light and temperature. Finally, the stone would enter the hyperlimnion, the vast deep water zone that makes up most of Lake Baikal's volume. Here, in the eternal darkness, the water temperature remains constant at around 3.2 degrees Celsius throughout the year. This is a world where pressure increases with every meter of depth, where sunlight has never penetrated, where life has evolved in ways that seem almost alien to those of us living in the sunlit world above. What makes these depths even more remarkable is that they hold approximately 20% of all the unfrozen fresh water on our planet. Let that number settle in your mind for a moment. One lake, sitting quietly in the heart of Siberia, contains a fifth of all the fresh water that isn't locked away in ice caps and glaciers. If every other source of fresh water on Earth suddenly became unavailable, Lake Baikal alone could supply the world's population with fresh water for 40 years. To put this in perspective, consider that Lake Baikal holds more water than all 5 of North America's Great Lakes combined. It contains more water than the Baltic Sea. The volume of water in Lake Baikal is so vast that if it could be spread evenly across the entire surface of the Earth, it would create a layer about 5 centimeters deep, covering every continent and ocean. This vast reservoir of water isn't stagnant. It's alive with subtle currents and movements that scientists are still working to understand fully. Deep beneath the surface, water moves in slow, majestic currents that take centuries to complete their cycles. Some water molecules that enter the lake today won't see the surface again for 400 years or more. They'll spend decades slowly spiraling through the depths in currents so gentle they're more like liquid breathing than flowing water. These deep currents are driven by subtle differences in temperature and density that create circulation patterns of extraordinary complexity. Thermohaline circulation, driven by tiny variations in temperature and mineral content, creates underwater rivers that flow through the lake's depths, like ghostly highways carrying water, nutrients, and microscopic life through three-dimensional pathways that exist in liquid space. The pressure at these depths creates conditions that exist nowhere else in the freshwater world. At the deepest points of Lake Baikal, the water pressure is more than 160 times greater than at the surface. This creates an environment so unique that life forms have evolved here that exist nowhere else on Earth. These aren't just different species. They're creatures so specially adapted to life in Baikal's depths that they represent entirely unique branches on the tree of life. In the perpetual darkness of these depths live creatures that seem designed by science fiction writers rather than evolution. There are amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures that have evolved to be completely transparent, like living glass sculptures swimming through liquid space. Some of these deep-water residents have lost their pigmentation entirely, becoming ghostly white inhabitants of a world where color has no meaning. The giant amphipods of Lake Baikal's depths are particularly remarkable. While most amphipods around the world are tiny creatures only a few millimeters long, some of Baikal's deep-water species grow to several centimeters in length. These gentle giants of the microscopic world have evolved to fill ecological niches that in ocean environments might be occupied by much larger creatures. One species, Acanthogammarus victori, can grow up to 9 centimeters long, enormous by amphipod standards. These creatures live in the deepest parts of the lake, feeding on organic matter that drifts down from the surface like snow falling through liquid space. Their large size allows them to process more food and survive in the nutrient-poor environment of the deep lake. The temperature in these depths remains remarkably constant, hovering around 3.2 degrees Celsius year-round. This thermal stability has created what scientists call a cold water refuge, a place where ancient life forms have been able to survive and evolve in isolation for millions of years. While the surface of the lake freezes and thaws with the seasons, while ice ages have come and gone above, the deep waters of Baikal have maintained their cool, steady temperature like a liquid time capsule. This temperature stability is one of the keys to understanding why Lake Baikal has become such an extraordinary center of evolution. Most lakes experience significant temperature variations that stress their inhabitants and limit the development of highly specialized species. But Baikal's great depth and volume create a thermal buffer that has allowed evolution to proceed along paths impossible in smaller, shallower bodies of water. Perhaps most mysteriously, the deepest parts of Lake Baikal show evidence of hydrothermal activity, underwater hot springs that add their warmth to the otherwise frigid depths. These thermal vents create pockets of slightly warmer water in the abyssal depths, around which unique communities of microorganisms have evolved. These microscopic life forms may be among the most ancient on Earth, living in conditions that might be similar to those in which life first evolved billions of years ago. The hydrothermal vents of Lake Baikal were only discovered in recent decades, and they continue to yield surprises. Unlike the dramatic volcanic vents found in ocean depths, Baikal's thermal features are gentler, warmer springs that seep from the lake bottom, creating localized environments where different rules apply. The water around these vents might be several degrees warmer than the surrounding depths, creating oases of relative warmth in the cold abyssal zone. The very bottom of Lake Baikal is carpeted with sediments that tell the story of millions of years of geological history. Core samples taken from these depths reveal layers upon layers of ancient material, volcanic ash from eruptions that occurred before humans walked the earth, pollen from long-extinct forests, and the fossilized remains of creatures that lived and died when the lake was young. Reading these sediment layers is like reading a book written by time itself, each layer a page in the Earth's autobiography. The deepest sediments contain evidence of the lake's earliest days, when the climate was different, when different species inhabited the region, when volcanic activity was more common. Higher layers record the coming and going of ice ages, the rise and fall of forests, the gradual changes in the lake's ecosystem over geological time. What's remarkable about these sediments is their incredible thickness. In some places, the accumulated material at the bottom of Lake Baikal is more than 7 kilometers deep. This means that beneath the deepest parts of the lake lies a column of historical material that, if it could be excavated, would provide an unparalleled record of our planet's environmental history stretching back through geological epochs. These sediments are so detailed and well-preserved that scientists can read in them a year-by-year record of environmental conditions going back millions of years. They can see evidence of individual volcanic eruptions, of years when unusual amounts of pollen blew into the lake, of periods when the lake's biological productivity increased or decreased. It's like having a time machine that allows us to witness the Earth's history with extraordinary precision. The water column itself is a study in vertical complexity. As you descend from the sun-dappled surface waters through the gradually darkening intermediate depths to the abyssal darkness below, you pass through distinct zones, each with its own characteristics. The boundaries between these zones aren't sharp lines, but gradual transitions, creating a three-dimensional ecosystem more complex than anything found in shallower bodies of water. In the surface waters, photosynthetic organisms convert sunlight into chemical energy, creating the primary productivity that supports all other life in the lake. This zone is relatively thin, only about 50 meters deep, but it's the engine that powers the entire ecosystem. Here, microscopic algae bloom and fade with the seasons, creating pulses of biological activity that ripple down through the entire water column. Below the surface layer, in the twilight zone where sunlight begins to fade, a different community of organisms has evolved. Here live creatures adapted to life in dim light, organisms that migrate vertically following the daily cycles of their prey. Some species spend their days in the darkness of the deep water and rise to the surface at night to feed, creating daily migrations that connect the depths to the surface in endless cycles. The circulation patterns within these depths are governed by forces so subtle they're almost mystical. Temperature differences of less than a degree, variations in dissolved minerals so small they can barely be measured, the gravitational pull of the moon, even changes in atmospheric pressure. All these factors combine to create currents that move water masses slowly through the lake's depths like underwater rivers flowing through liquid space. During winter, when the surface of the lake freezes, something extraordinary happens in the depths. The ice cover acts like a lid, sealing the lake off from the atmosphere and creating conditions where the deep waters become even more isolated and mysterious. It's during these winter months that some of the most unique biological processes in Lake Baikal occur, as organisms adapted to ice-covered conditions begin their own seasonal cycles in the dark waters below. The acoustic properties of these depths are equally fascinating. Sound travels differently through Baikal's deep waters than it does through ordinary lakes, creating acoustic channels where whale-like songs from the lake's seals can travel for kilometers through the darkness. The deep waters act like a natural sound chamber, amplifying and carrying the subtle communications of the lake's deeper inhabitants across vast distances. Scientists studying these depths often describe a sense of vertigo when contemplating the true scale of what lies beneath Baikal's deceptively calm surface. To dive into these waters, even with the most advanced submersibles, is to enter a world that feels more like outer space than an earthly lake. The darkness is complete, the pressure immense, and the sense of vast depth stretching away in all directions creates an experience that few humans have ever known. The few researchers who have descended to Baikal's deepest points in submersibles describe an otherworldly experience. The water is so clear that their lights can penetrate far into the darkness, revealing a landscape of sediment plains and rocky outcrops that stretch away into liquid space. Strange creatures, many never seen before, drift through their light beams like aliens in an underwater sky. These deep-water explorations continue to yield discoveries that challenge our understanding of freshwater ecosystems. New species are regularly found in the depths, organisms so unique they require the creation of entirely new taxonomic categories. Some of these creatures appear to be living fossils, representatives of ancient lineages that have survived in the isolated depths, while their relatives in other environments went extinct millions of years ago. Yet it's precisely this mysterious depth that gives Lake Baikal much of its power and beauty. Knowing that beneath the surface we can see lies a world deeper than mountains are tall, filled with ancient water and unique life forms, adds a profound dimension to even the most casual encounter with the lake. Every ripple on the surface is connected to this vast underwater realm. Every reflection carries with it the weight of these hidden depths. As we contemplate these mysterious depths from the comfort of our imagination, we can almost feel the vast weight of water stretching down into darkness, holding secrets that humanity is only beginning to discover. In a world where we sometimes feel that every mystery has been solved, every corner of the earth explored, Lake Baikal's depths remind us that profound mysteries still exist, waiting patiently in the dark waters of our planet's most ancient lake. The pressure down there is so intense that it would crush any surface-dwelling creature instantly, yet life has found ways to not just survive, but thrive in these extreme conditions. The organisms that call these depths home have evolved biochemical adaptations that allow their proteins to function under crushing pressure, their cell membranes to remain flexible in the cold, their metabolisms to operate efficiently in an environment where food is scarce and energy must be conserved. These adaptations represent millions of years of evolutionary experimentation, creating solutions to the challenges of deep-water life that are found nowhere else on Earth. The study of these organisms is providing insights not just into the history of life on our planet, but into the possibilities for life in extreme environments elsewhere in the universe. Within the crystalline waters of Lake Baikal exists what scientists often describe as a living museum, a collection of life forms so unique, so perfectly adapted to their ancient home, that they represent evolutionary stories found nowhere else on Earth. This isn't simply a lake with fish and plants. This is an evolutionary laboratory where life has been experimenting for millions of years, creating species that exist only here in these sacred waters of Siberia. The most celebrated resident of Lake Baikal is undoubtedly the Baikal seal, known locally as the Nerpa. These gentle creatures are living mysteries themselves, the world's only exclusively freshwater seal, inhabitants of a lake that sits hundreds of kilometers from the nearest ocean. How did marine mammals come to call this inland sea their home? The story stretches back through time to when the ancestors of today's Nerpa followed ancient rivers from the Arctic Ocean, eventually finding their way to Baikal and deciding, in their mammalian wisdom, that this pristine lake was the perfect place to make a new life. The journey that brought the Nerpa's ancestors to Lake Baikal is one of the great migration stories in natural history. Millions of years ago, when the geography of Siberia was very different from today, a network of rivers and waterways connected Lake Baikal to the Arctic Ocean. Early seals, following fish populations and seeking new territory, gradually made their way inland along these waterways. As the climate changed and the waterways shifted, some populations of seals found themselves isolated in Lake Baikal, cut off from their oceanic origins. Rather than perishing in this landlocked environment, these ancestral seals adapted and thrived. Over millions of years, they evolved into a species perfectly suited to freshwater life, developing characteristics that distinguish them from all other seals on Earth. The Nerpa became smaller than their oceanic cousins, more agile in the confined spaces of a lake, and perfectly adapted to the seasonal rhythms of their freshwater home. Watching a Nerpa surface in the calm waters of Lake Baikal is like witnessing a gentle miracle. Their whiskered faces emerge from the water with an almost human-like curiosity, their large, dark eyes reflecting the sky above. These seals have evolved to be perfectly suited to their freshwater home, developing thicker fur than their ocean cousins and learning to navigate the unique seasonal rhythms of their lake. The Nerpa's adaptation to Lake Baikal extends to every aspect of their biology. Their fur is denser and more insulating than that of marine seals, protecting them from the cold temperatures of the lake's depths. Their diving abilities are extraordinary. They can remain underwater for up to 70 minutes and dive to depths of more than 400 meters, exploring the lake's mysterious depths in search of food. In winter, when the lake freezes, Nerpa maintain breathing holes in the ice, creating a network of air pockets that allow them to live comfortably beneath the crystal ceiling of frozen Baikal. They use their claws to keep these holes open, scraping away ice that might seal them off from the air above. Some Nerpa also create snow dens on the ice surface, where they give birth to their pups in February and March. The relationship between the Nerpa and the lake is one of perfect harmony. They feed primarily on the lake's abundant fish populations, particularly a small, transparent fish called the golomyanka, which itself is another of Baikal's endemic treasures. The Nerpa have learned to exploit the vertical migrations of their prey, diving deep during the day when fish retreat to the depths, and hunting in shallower waters at night when their prey rises toward the surface. The golomyanka is perhaps one of the most remarkable fish in the world. So translucent you can literally read print through its body, composed of up to 40% oil and possessing the extraordinary ability to give birth to live young rather than laying eggs like most fish. This transparency isn't just a curious adaptation, it's a sophisticated form of camouflage that makes the golomyanka nearly invisible in the clear waters of Lake Baikal. These golomyanka live in the deep waters of the lake, migrating vertically each day in one of nature's most elegant dances. As darkness falls, they rise from the depths toward the surface, following the microscopic plankton that form their diet. As dawn approaches, they descend again into the darker waters below. This daily migration creates a living rhythm in the lake, a pulse of life that has been beating steadily for millions of years. The oil content in golomyanka serves multiple purposes. It provides buoyancy, allowing these fish to maintain their position in the water column without constantly swimming. It serves as an energy store during periods when food is scarce. And it may provide protection against the cold temperatures of the lake's depths. When golomyanka die, their oil-rich bodies sometimes wash ashore, where they were once collected by local people for use as lamp oil and traditional medicine. But the Nerpa and golomyanka are just the most visible members of an extraordinary community. Lake Baikal is home to more than 2,500 animal species, and an astounding 2/3 of these exist nowhere else on Earth. This level of endemism, species found only in one specific location, is virtually unheard of in freshwater environments. It's as if Lake Baikal has been conducting its own private experiment in evolution, isolated enough to develop unique life forms, yet stable enough to nurture them across geological time. The reasons for this extraordinary endemism lie in Lake Baikal's unique history and characteristics. The lake's great age has provided time for evolution to work its patient magic, allowing species to diverge from their ancestors and develop unique adaptations. The lake's isolation has prevented genetic mixing with related species in other water bodies, allowing evolutionary changes to accumulate and new species to emerge. The lake's stable environment has provided the consistent conditions necessary for highly specialized species to evolve and survive. Many environments experience dramatic changes over geological time. Lakes dry up, rivers change course, climates shift dramatically. But Lake Baikal has provided a relatively stable home for millions of years, allowing evolution to proceed along pathways that would be impossible in more changeable environments. In the microscopic realm, Baikal's uniqueness becomes even more apparent. The lake's waters teem with tiny creatures that work tirelessly as nature's cleanup crew. Perhaps the most important of these is a small crustacean called Episcura baikalensis, which exists only in Lake Baikal. These microscopic filter feeders are largely responsible for the lake's extraordinary clarity, consuming bacteria, and other particles that would otherwise cloud the water. Each individual episcura is smaller than a grain of rice, but collectively they process the entire volume of the lake and keep it crystal clear. They work around the clock, filtering water through their specialized feeding appendages, consuming bacteria, small algae, and organic particles. A single episcura can filter several milliliters of water per day, a tiny amount for one organism, but when multiplied by the billions of individuals in the lake, the total filtering capacity is enormous. The evolutionary stories written in Baikal's waters are extraordinary in their diversity. There are flatworms that have evolved transparency so complete they seem like living liquid. There are amphipods, small crustaceans, that have diversified into more than 350 different species within the lake, each one perfectly adapted to its specific niche in Baikal's complex ecosystem. This amphipod diversity is one of the most remarkable examples of adaptive radiation in the freshwater world. From a few ancestral species that colonized the lake millions of years ago, amphipods have evolved into an extraordinary variety of forms. Some are tiny, feeding on microscopic particles in the water column. Others are relatively large, prowling the lake bottom as predators. Some are specialized for life in the shallow, rocky areas near shore, while others inhabit the soft sediments of the deep lake bottom. Some live in the shallow, sunlit waters near shore, where they graze on algae and small organisms growing on rocks and aquatic plants. Others inhabit the crushing depths of the abyssal zone, where they feed on organic matter that drifts down from the surface like underwater snow. Still others occupy the middle waters, where light begins to fade into darkness, creating a three-dimensional ecosystem where every depth has its own specialized inhabitants. Among the most fascinating of these amphipods are the giant species that have evolved in the lake's depths. While most amphipods around the world are tiny creatures, some of Baikal's deep water species grow to several centimeters in length, becoming the gentle giants of their microscopic world. These larger amphipods have evolved to fill ecological niches that in ocean environments might be occupied by much larger creatures, demonstrating the unique evolutionary pressures and opportunities that Baikal's isolated environment has provided. The largest of these, Acanthogomarus victori, can reach nearly 10 centimeters in length, enormous by amphipod standards. These creatures are found only in the deepest parts of Lake Baikal, where they serve as important scavengers, processing organic matter that falls from the surface waters above. Their large size allows them to tackle food items that smaller amphipods cannot handle, filling a crucial ecological role in the lake's deep water ecosystem. The sponges of Lake Baikal tell their own remarkable story. These primitive animals, which might seem unremarkable at first glance, have evolved into forms found nowhere else on Earth. The Baikalian sponges have developed unique skeletal structures and growth patterns, creating underwater gardens of living architecture that provide habitat for countless smaller creatures. The endemic sponge Lubomirskia baikalensis grows in formations that can reach several meters in height, creating underwater forests on the lake bottom. These sponge forests provide three-dimensional habitat for hundreds of other species, creating complex ecosystems within ecosystems. The sponges filter vast amounts of water, contributing to the lake's clarity while providing food and shelter for countless smaller organisms. Some of these sponges grow in formations that resemble underwater coral reefs, creating three-dimensional habitats in the lake's clear waters. The branching forms of these sponges provide countless nooks and crannies where small organisms can find shelter from predators and currents. The surfaces of the sponges themselves become gardens where algae, bacteria, and other microorganisms grow, creating complex food webs within the living architecture of the sponge colonies. The plant life of Lake Baikal is equally remarkable, though often overlooked by those focused on the lake's more charismatic animal inhabitants. Underwater meadows of endemic algae create the foundation of the lake's food web, converting sunlight and nutrients into the energy that supports all other life in the lake. These algae have evolved unique strategies for surviving in Baikal's ultra-clear waters, where the very transparency that makes the lake so beautiful also creates challenges for photosynthetic organisms trying to capture enough light for survival. Many of Baikal's algae have evolved specialized pigments that allow them to capture light more efficiently in the lake's clear waters. Some species have developed the ability to move up and down in the water column, following optimal light conditions as they change throughout the day and seasons. Others have evolved unique cell shapes that maximize their surface area for light capture while minimizing their volume to reduce sinking. The seasonal rhythms of life in Lake Baikal create a natural calendar that has been followed by its inhabitants for millions of years. As winter approaches and ice begins to form, the biological activity in the lake doesn't simply slow down, it transforms. Some species enter dormant states, while others become more active under the ice. The Nerpa seals, for instance, actually prefer the winter months when they can rest on the ice and use breathing holes to access the rich waters below. The formation of ice creates new habitats and opportunities for life. Some organisms have evolved to live within the ice itself, creating communities that exist nowhere else. Others take advantage of the stable conditions under the ice cover when the water is protected from wind and storms to engage in activities like reproduction that require calm conditions. Spring brings one of Baikal's most spectacular biological events, the blooming of diatoms, microscopic algae that create the base of the lake's food web. These tiny organisms multiply rapidly as sunlight returns and ice begins to break up, creating clouds of microscopic life that feed the larger creatures throughout the lake. The timing of this bloom is critical for many of Baikal's species, and any disruption to this natural calendar can have effects that ripple through the entire ecosystem. The diatom bloom is like an underwater spring, a burst of biological productivity that supports the entire food web for the rest of the year. The blooming diatoms are consumed by microscopic crustaceans like Episcora, which are in turn eaten by small fish, which feed larger fish, which finally support the Nerpa seals at the top of the food web. Every link in this chain depends on the precise timing of the spring bloom. The predator-prey relationships in Lake Baikal have evolved into a delicate balance that speaks to the stability of this ancient ecosystem. The grayling, one of the lake's larger fish species, patrols the shallow waters hunting for smaller fish and invertebrates. Pike lurk in the weedy areas near shore, ambush predators that can remain motionless for hours before striking with lightning speed. The ommel, a fish related to salmon, forms schools in the open waters, feeding on the abundant plankton and in turn providing food for the Nerpa seals. What makes these relationships even more remarkable is their longevity. Unlike ecosystems that have been repeatedly disrupted by climate changes, glaciation, or other major environmental shifts, Lake Baikal has provided a stable home for its inhabitants for millions of years. This stability has allowed predator-prey relationships to evolve into extraordinarily fine-tuned balances, creating an ecosystem where every species has found its perfect niche. The microbial life in Lake Baikal represents perhaps the most ancient and mysterious component of the lake's living museum. In the deepest waters and in the sediments at the lake's bottom live bacteria and archaea that may be among the oldest life forms on Earth. Some of these microorganisms have been isolated from the outside world for so long that they represent evolutionary lineages that diverged from other life forms millions of years ago. Recent discoveries have revealed that Lake Baikal's depths harbor microbial communities unlike anything found elsewhere on Earth. These microscopic inhabitants have evolved unique biochemical pathways for surviving in the high-pressure, low-temperature environment of the lake's deepest waters. Some produce compounds that have never been seen before in nature, while others have developed methods of energy production that don't rely on sunlight or even oxygen. The interconnectedness of all these life forms creates a web of relationships so complex and finely balanced that it resembles a living symphony, with each species playing its part in a composition that has been millions of years in the making. The transparent Golomianca feeds on microscopic crustaceans, which in turn filter bacteria from the water, which break down organic matter that feeds the algae, which provide oxygen for all the lake's creatures. Every thread in this web is essential, every relationship carefully evolved and perfectly balanced. Remove any single component, and the effects ripple through the entire system. This interdependence is both the strength and the vulnerability of Lake Baikal's ecosystem. It has created extraordinary diversity and stability, but it also means that any disruption can have far-reaching consequences. The seasonal migrations within the lake create vertical highways of life, with organisms moving up and down in the water column following food, temperature, and light conditions. Some amphipods migrate daily from the depths to the surface and back, following their plankton prey. Fish species move between different depths as temperatures change with the seasons. Even bacteria and other microorganisms show vertical movements in response to changing conditions. These migrations create a four-dimensional ecosystem where time adds another layer of complexity to the three-dimensional structure of the water column. The lake is never static. It's constantly in motion, with countless organisms following ancient patterns of movement that connect every part of the ecosystem to every other part. As we drift quietly through this living museum in our imagination, surrounded by creatures that exist nowhere else on Earth, we can almost hear the gentle conversations between species that have been neighbors for millions of years. This is evolution made visible, adaptation made tangible, the patient work of natural selection creating beauty and diversity beyond anything human imagination could devise. The remarkable thing about Lake Baikal's living museum is that it's still actively creating new exhibits. Evolution hasn't stopped here. It continues to work its patient magic, creating new species and new adaptations even today. Along the shores of Lake Baikal, where the ancient waters meet the land, generations of people have lived and dreamed, creating stories that are as deep and enduring as the lake itself. These are the voices of the Buryat people, the indigenous inhabitants of this sacred region, whose legends and traditions have woven themselves into the very mist that rises from Baikal's surface each morning. Long before scientists studied the lake's unique biology or measured its extraordinary depths, the Buryat people understood that Baikal was something sacred, something beyond the ordinary. In their language, they called it Baigal, meaning rich fire, or nature lake, recognizing in this ancient body of water a spiritual presence that demanded reverence and respect. To them, this wasn't simply a geographical feature, it was a living entity, a sacred being that connected the earthly world with the realm of spirits. The Buryat understanding of Lake Baikal as a living entity reflects a profound wisdom about the relationship between humans and the natural world. In their worldview, the lake wasn't something separate from human life, to be used or exploited, but rather a relative, a family member deserving of respect, care, and gratitude. This perspective shaped every aspect of their interaction with the lake, from the ways they fished its waters to the ceremonies they performed on its shores. The creation stories told around Buryat fires for countless generations paint Lake Baikal as the work of the spirits themselves. One particularly beautiful legend tells of how the lake was formed from the tears of a grieving goddess who wept for her lost love until her sorrow filled the great depression in the earth, creating waters so pure they reflected not just the sky above, but the very soul of the divine. In this legend, the goddess was a powerful spirit who fell in love with a mortal man. Their love was pure and deep, but the laws of heaven forbade such unions between divine and earthly beings. When the man died, as all mortals must, the goddess wept for him with such intensity that her tears carved out the great basin that would become Lake Baikal. Her tears were so pure, so filled with divine love and sorrow, that they created waters unlike any others on earth, clear as crystal, deep as eternity, and blessed with life that exists nowhere else. Another story speaks of the lake as the eye of the earth itself, constantly watching, constantly aware, seeing all that happens in the world above and below. In this version, the earth was once blind, unable to see the beauty of the sky above or the life that moved across its surface. The spirits took pity on the earth and gave it an eye, Lake Baikal, through which it could see and appreciate the world it supported. This is why, the legend says, the lake's waters are so clear and reflective, because they are literally the earth's eye, designed to see and reflect the beauty of existence. These weren't mere stories to pass the time during long Siberian nights. They were living philosophy, ways of understanding humanity's relationship with the natural world that recognized the lake as a partner in life, rather than simply a resource to be used. The Buryat people developed a code of conduct around the lake that was both practical and spiritual, understanding that certain areas were too sacred to disturb, that certain seasons required silence and respect, that the lake itself had moods and preferences that wise people learned to read and honor. The traditional fishing practices of the Buryat people reflected this deep respect for the lake. They didn't simply take fish whenever and wherever they pleased, but followed careful protocols that ensured the lake's continued health and abundance. Certain areas were off-limits during breeding seasons, certain types of nets and fishing methods were forbidden to prevent overharvesting, and every fishing expedition began with ceremonies of gratitude and requests for permission from the lake's spirits. The shamanic traditions of the Buryat people placed Lake Baikal at the center of their spiritual universe. Shamans, spiritual intermediaries who could communicate with the spirit world, considered the lake to be one of the most powerful sacred sites on earth. They believed that the spirits of the lake could grant healing, wisdom, and protection to those who approached with proper reverence. The shamanic understanding of Lake Baikal was remarkably sophisticated, recognizing the lake as a complex spiritual ecosystem, where different types of spirits inhabited different areas and depths. There were spirits of the surface waters, who controlled weather and navigation, spirits of the depths, who held ancient wisdom and the power of healing, and spirits of the shoreline, who watched over the interface between water and land. Shamanic ceremonies at Lake Baikal often involved elaborate rituals designed to communicate with these various spirits. Offerings were made at specific locations along the shore, prayers were chanted in the ancient shamanic language, and sacred objects were placed in the water as gifts to the spiritual inhabitants of the lake. These ceremonies weren't just religious observances, they were diplomatic missions, establishing and maintaining good relationships between human communities and the spiritual powers that governed the lake. Even today, you can find prayer flags and offerings left on trees and rocks around the lake's shoreline, colorful ribbons and small gifts that continue an unbroken tradition of communication with the lake's spiritual presence. These offerings, called surge, are tied to trees and sacred posts around the lake, creating a network of prayer sites that connects the physical landscape with the spiritual realm. The tradition of making offerings to Lake Baikal reflects a deep understanding of reciprocity in relationships with the natural world. The Buryat people understood that if they wanted to receive gifts from the lake, fish, fresh water, spiritual guidance, they needed to give gifts in return. These offerings weren't just symbolic gestures, but represented a real exchange, a way of maintaining balance in the relationship between human communities and the natural world. The arrival of other peoples to the Baikal region brought new layers to the cultural tapestry that surrounds the lake. Russian explorers, arriving in the 17th century, were awed by the lake's immensity and purity. Their journals and letters home describe a sense of encountering something beyond the merely physical, a place where the boundaries between the material and spiritual worlds seemed thinner than elsewhere. These early Russian explorers often wrote about Lake Baikal in language that bordered on the mystical. They described feelings of profound peace and spiritual elevation when they first encountered the lake, sensations of being in the presence of something sacred and ancient. Many wrote about dreams that came to them while camping beside the lake's shores, dreams that seemed more vivid and meaningful than ordinary sleep experiences. The Russian Cossacks who first mapped the region were hardened frontiersmen, accustomed to the harsh realities of wilderness life. Yet even these practical men wrote about Lake Baikal with unusual reverence, describing it as a place that changed them, that made them think differently about their relationship with the natural world. Some reported that their indigenous guides insisted on performing ceremonies before setting foot in certain areas around the lake, rituals that the Cossacks came to respect and eventually participate in. These early Russian settlers didn't simply impose their own culture on the region. They learned from the indigenous peoples, adopting practices and beliefs that made sense in this unique environment. They learned to read the lake's moods, to understand when storms were approaching by watching the behavior of the water and the wildlife. They learned which areas of the lake were dangerous and which were safe, knowledge that had been accumulated by the Buryat people over thousands of years. The integration of Russian and indigenous cultures around Lake Baikal created new traditions that combined elements from both backgrounds. Russian Orthodox Christianity blended with shamanic beliefs, creating unique forms of spiritual practice that honored both Christ and the ancient spirits of the lake. Russian folktales began to incorporate stories about Lake Baikal, while Buryat legends began to include references to Russian historical figures and events. The construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway at the turn of the 20th century brought dramatic changes to the Baikal region, but also created some of the most romantic stories associated with the lake. During winter months, when the lake was frozen solid, railway cars were actually pulled across the ice itself, creating what must have been one of the most spectacular train rides in history. Passengers on these winter crossings described the surreal experience of traveling across the frozen lake in the depths of winter, surrounded by ice formations that sparkled like crystal palaces in the starlight. The train would move slowly across the ice, its headlight cutting through the Arctic darkness, revealing a landscape that seemed more like an alien world than earthly terrain. The railway workers who built this impossible line through the Siberian wilderness developed their own folklore around Lake Baikal. They told stories of mysterious lights dancing over the lake on winter nights, of voices calling from the ice that could lead travelers safely home, or, if not properly respected, lead them astray into the frozen wilderness. These railway stories merged with indigenous traditions, creating a new mythology that honored both the practical dangers and the spiritual mystery of the lake. Workers spoke of the lake's protective spirit, which would guide lost travelers to safety if they showed proper respect, but which could also punish those who disrespected the sacred waters. One particularly persistent legend among railway workers told of a mysterious train that appeared on the lake during the worst winter storms. This phantom train would appear to travelers who were lost or in danger, its lights visible through the blizzard, leading them to safety. Workers who claimed to have seen this phantom train described it as silent and ghostly, moving across the ice without leaving tracks, disappearing as suddenly as it appeared once the traveler was out of danger. During the Soviet era, Lake Baikal became a symbol of the immensity and beauty of the Russian landscape, but it also faced new challenges as industrialization threatened its pristine waters. This period saw the emergence of a new type of cultural relationship with the lake, environmental activism that drew on both scientific understanding and ancient spiritual traditions. The movement to protect Baikal brought together unlikely allies: scientists studying the lake's unique ecosystem, writers and artists inspired by its beauty, and indigenous peoples fighting to preserve their sacred sites. This coalition created a new form of cultural expression around Lake Baikal, one that combined modern environmental awareness with ancient wisdom about living in harmony with nature. Soviet-era poets and writers found in Lake Baikal a symbol that could express complex feelings about the relationship between human society and the natural world. During a time when rapid industrialization was transforming the Soviet landscape, Lake Baikal represented something pure and unchanging, a reminder of the natural beauty that existed before human intervention. The literature and poetry inspired by Lake Baikal forms its own cultural landscape. Russian writers have found in the lake a source of metaphor and meaning that speaks to the deepest aspects of the Russian soul. The lake appears in works as a symbol of purity in a corrupted world, of depth in a shallow age, of permanence in times of constant change. Poets have written of losing themselves in contemplation of the lake's vastness, of finding in its depths reflections of their own deepest thoughts and feelings. The lake becomes a mirror not just for the sky above, but for the human soul, reflecting back our deepest longings for connection with something greater than ourselves. The great Russian poet Sergei Yesenin wrote about Lake Baikal as a place where the soul could find rest from the struggles of modern life. His poems describe the lake as a sanctuary where the noise and confusion of civilization fade away, replaced by the ancient rhythms of water and wind, ice and thaw, the eternal cycles that govern the natural world. The musical traditions associated with Lake Baikal are equally rich and varied. Buryat throat singing, with its deep, resonant tones, seems perfectly suited to the acoustics of the lake's wide open spaces. Traditional songs tell the stories of the lake's creation, of the spirits that inhabit its waters, of the seasonal cycles that govern life around its shores. These traditional songs serve multiple purposes in Buryat culture. They preserve historical and spiritual knowledge, passing down from generation to generation the stories and beliefs that define the community's relationship with Lake Baikal. They provide a form of spiritual practice, connecting singers and listeners with the sacred power of the lake. And they create social bonds, bringing community members together in shared expressions of cultural identity. Russian folk songs have adopted the lake as a symbol of the homeland, creating melodies that capture both the melancholy and the majesty of this Siberian sea. These songs often express themes of longing and separation, using the vastness of Lake Baikal as a metaphor for the distances that separate loved ones in the immense landscape of Russia. The famous song Slavnoye More, Sviashcheny Baikal, Glorious Sea, Sacred Baikal, has become an unofficial anthem for the region, its haunting melody capturing the mysterious beauty of the lake. The song tells the story of prisoners being transported across the frozen lake, their longing for freedom reflected in the vast expanse of ice and water around them. The visual arts have found endless inspiration in Lake Baikal's ever-changing beauty. Traditional Buryat art incorporated patterns and colors inspired by the lake's seasonal transformations, the deep blues and greens of summer waters, the crystal whites and silvers of winter ice, the golden and purple hues of sunrise and sunset reflected on the lake's surface. Buryat artists developed distinctive styles of depicting the lake that captured not just its physical appearance, but its spiritual significance. Their paintings and textiles often show the lake populated with spiritual beings, surrounded by sacred symbols connected to the cosmic forces that govern the universe. Russian landscape painters discovered in Baikal a subject that challenged their skills while rewarding their efforts with scenes of almost supernatural beauty. The lake's constantly changing light and weather conditions provided endless opportunities for artists seeking to capture the interplay between water, sky, and land. The famous Russian painter Isaac Levitan spent months around Lake Baikal, creating a series of works that captured the lake's mysterious beauty. His paintings show the lake in different seasons and weather conditions, always emphasizing the sense of vastness and spiritual power that the lake inspires in those who encounter it. The culinary traditions of the Baikal region reflect the lake's abundance and the practical wisdom of people who have lived in harmony with this environment for generations. Traditional dishes feature the lake's fish prepared in ways that honor both their flavor and their sacred significance. The omel, a fish found only in Baikal and a few connected rivers, is prepared in traditional ways that have been passed down through generations, smoked over specific woods, seasoned with local herbs, prepared as part of ceremonial meals that celebrate the lake's generosity. The preparation of omel is surrounded by rituals and traditions that acknowledge the fish as a gift from the lake spirits. Traditional Buryat cuisine also includes dishes made from other lake fish, prepared with wild herbs and vegetables that grow around the lake's shores. These meals are often communal affairs, bringing families and communities together to share not just food, but stories, songs, and spiritual practices that connect them to their ancestral relationship with Lake Baikal. The calendar of festivals and celebrations around Lake Baikal follows rhythms that are both ancient and adaptive. Traditional Buryat celebrations mark the changing seasons, the migration patterns of wildlife, the freezing and thawing of the lake. These celebrations aren't simply cultural events. They're ways of staying connected to the natural rhythms that govern life in this region. The most important of these celebrations is the annual ritual that marks the complete freezing of Lake Baikal. This ceremony, which can occur any time from late December to early February depending on weather conditions, celebrates the transformation of the lake from liquid to solid, from a realm of flowing water to a crystal highway that connects communities separated by water during the summer months. These celebrations are ways of maintaining the spiritual relationship between human communities and the lake itself. They acknowledge the lake as a participant in human life, rather than simply a backdrop to it, recognizing that the well-being of human communities and the health of the lake are intimately connected. Modern cultural expressions continue to draw inspiration from Lake Baikal while adapting to contemporary realities. Contemporary Buryat artists blend traditional motifs with modern techniques, creating works that speak to both ancient wisdom and current challenges. Musicians combine traditional instruments with modern sounds, creating compositions that capture the timeless mystery of the lake, while addressing contemporary concerns about its protection and preservation. Young Buryat artists are finding new ways to express their cultural connection to Lake Baikal through contemporary media. Photography, film, digital art, and even social media are being used to share the beauty and spiritual significance of the lake, with audiences around the world creating new forms of cultural expression that honor ancient traditions while speaking to modern concerns. The stories told by families who have lived around Lake Baikal for generations are treasure troves of practical wisdom and spiritual insight. These are stories of reading weather patterns in the behavior of the lake's waters, of understanding the migration patterns of fish and seals, of knowing which plants and herbs grow best in the lake's unique environment. But they're also stories of dreams and visions, of encounters with the lake's spiritual presence, of moments when the boundary between the physical and metaphysical worlds seemed to dissolve entirely. Grandparents tell grandchildren about nights when the lake spoke to them in dreams, revealing hidden truths about life and death, about the connections that bind all living things together. These family stories often include accounts of miraculous healings that occurred near the lake's shores, of prayers answered during times of crisis, of guidance received when families faced difficult decisions. Whether these stories describe literal miraculous events or metaphorical truths about the power of nature to heal and inspire, they reflect a deep belief in the lake's capacity to intervene beneficially in human affairs. The tradition of pilgrimage to Lake Baikal continues to this day, drawing people from around the world who seek something more than ordinary tourism. These modern pilgrims often describe their journey to the lake in spiritual terms, speaking of feeling called to visit this place, of experiencing profound moments of clarity and peace while sitting beside its waters. Many pilgrims report experiences that echo the traditional beliefs of indigenous peoples, dreams that seem unusually vivid and meaningful, feelings of profound connection with the natural world, moments of spiritual insight that occur while contemplating the lake's vast beauty. Whether these experiences reflect the lake's actual spiritual power or the human capacity to find meaning in encounters with natural beauty, they continue the ancient tradition of seeing Lake Baikal as a place where the ordinary world and the sacred realm meet. The lake continues to serve as a mirror not just for the sky above, but for the souls of those who come to its shores seeking meaning and connection. In our modern world, where many people feel disconnected from nature and from the deeper currents of meaning in life, Lake Baikal offers an opportunity to experience the kind of profound connection with the natural world that was once common to all human cultures. As we sit quietly by these ancient shores in our imagination, listening to the whisper of cultures that have found meaning and beauty in Lake Baikal's waters, we can almost hear the voices of all those who have called this place sacred: indigenous shamans and Russian poets, railway workers and environmental activists, artists and pilgrims, all united by their recognition that some places on Earth are more than geographical features. Some waters hold reflections not just of clouds and sky, but of the deepest aspects of human experience and divine mystery. In the gentle lapping of waves against the ancient shores, in the play of light on water that has been unchanged for millions of years, in the profound silence that surrounds this sacred place, we can hear the whisper of all the cultures that have recognized Lake Baikal as a doorway between the ordinary world and the realm of the sacred. In the gentle embrace of our exploration, we now turn to a chapter that requires both honesty and hope, for even the most ancient and seemingly eternal places on our planet face challenges in our rapidly changing world. Lake Baikal, for all its vastness and resilience, for all its millions of years of patient existence, has begun to show signs that it, too, is vulnerable to the changes that human activity has brought to our shared Earth. The challenges facing Lake Baikal aren't dramatic in the way of sudden disasters. They're more like subtle changes in a symphony that has been playing the same beautiful composition for millions of years. Climate change, that gentle but persistent alteration of our planet's weather patterns, has begun to touch even this remote corner of Siberia with its gradually shifting hand. The winters around Lake Baikal, which for countless generations arrived with predictable timing and familiar severity, have begun to show variations that concern both scientists and local communities. The ice that once formed reliably across the lake's surface, creating that magical crystal ceiling we spoke of earlier, now forms later in the year and breaks up earlier in the spring. Over the past 50 years, the ice season has shortened by almost 3 weeks, a change that might seem small, but represents a significant shift in the ancient rhythms that have governed this ecosystem for millennia. This might seem like a small change, but for the lake's ecosystem, it's like changing the timing of a carefully choreographed dance that has been performed the same way for thousands of years. The formation and melting of ice on Lake Baikal isn't just a physical process, it's the conductor's baton that orchestrates the entire biological symphony of the lake. The Nerpa seals, those gentle ambassadors of Baikal's waters, are particularly sensitive to these changes in ice formation. Their entire life cycle has evolved around the predictable patterns of ice formation and breakup. They give birth to their pups in snow dens built on the ice, depending on stable ice conditions during the crucial early weeks of their offspring's lives. The timing of pupping is precisely calibrated to coincide with the period of most stable ice conditions, typically in February and March. The pups are born with white fur that provides camouflage against the snow and ice, and they depend on their mother's milk for several weeks before they're ready to enter the water. If ice forms late or breaks up early, it compresses the time available for these critical life events, creating stress that ripples through the entire population. When ice forms later in the year, pregnant female seals may struggle to find suitable locations for creating pupping dens. When ice breaks up earlier, young pups may be forced into the water before they're fully prepared for aquatic life. These changes in timing can affect pup survival rates, which in turn affects the overall population of seals in the lake. The warming temperatures also affect the lake's unique water circulation patterns, those gentle currents that have been mixing and oxygenating Baikal's waters for millions of years. As surface waters warm more than usual, the temperature differential that drives these currents can be altered, potentially affecting the distribution of nutrients and oxygen throughout the lake's depths. The deep circulation patterns in Lake Baikal are driven by subtle differences in water temperature and density. When surface waters warm more than normal, it can create stronger stratification, reducing the mixing between surface and deep waters. This reduced mixing can affect the distribution of oxygen and nutrients throughout the water column, potentially altering the conditions that support the lake's unique ecosystems. It's like changing the breathing pattern of a sleeping giant. The effects might not be immediately visible, but they could be profound. The organisms that have evolved in the lake's depths depend on the steady supply of oxygen that comes from surface waters mixing with deeper layers. Any disruption to this circulation could affect these deep water communities in ways that we don't yet fully understand. Tourism, ironically, presents both an opportunity and a challenge for Lake Baikal. On one hand, the growing recognition of the lake's extraordinary beauty and scientific importance has brought increased attention to the need for its protection. Visitors from around the world return home as ambassadors for Baikal, carrying with them an appreciation for its unique value and a commitment to its preservation. The economic value of tourism also provides incentives for local communities to maintain the lake's pristine condition. When the lake's beauty and purity become sources of income for local people, there's a powerful economic incentive to protect these qualities. Tourism can provide sustainable livelihoods that are compatible with conservation, creating a positive feedback loop where protecting the lake's environment becomes economically beneficial. However, the increasing number of visitors also creates pressures that require careful management. The shoreline areas where tourists concentrate can experience erosion and disturbance to the delicate ecosystems that exist at the interface between land and water. Popular camping spots and hiking trails can become degraded if visitor numbers exceed the land's capacity to recover from human impact. Boat traffic, while still minimal compared to more developed lakes, introduces noise and potential pollution to waters that have known mostly silence for their entire existence. The exhaust from boats can contribute to air pollution, while fuel spills or other accidents could introduce contaminants to the lake's pristine waters. The very popularity of Lake Baikal as a destination creates what conservationists call the tragedy of loving a place to death. The more people who want to experience the lake's beauty and tranquility, the more difficult it becomes to maintain the very qualities that make it special. Managing this balance between access and protection is one of the ongoing challenges facing those responsible for the lake's stewardship. The surrounding watersheds that feed Lake Baikal face their own pressures from human development. Logging operations in the taiga forests that surround the lake can affect the quality and quantity of water that flows into Baikal. When forests are disturbed, the careful balance of nutrient flow that has developed over millions of years can be altered, potentially affecting the lake's legendary clarity and the microorganisms that maintain its purity. Forests play a crucial role in regulating water flow into Lake Baikal. They act like giant sponges, absorbing rainfall and releasing it slowly into streams and rivers that feed the lake. When forests are cut, this natural regulation is disrupted, potentially leading to increased erosion, nutrient runoff, and changes in the timing and volume of water entering the lake. The roots of forest trees also help stabilize soil and prevent erosion. When forests are removed, soil can wash into streams and rivers, carrying with it nutrients and sediments that can alter the chemistry and clarity of Lake Baikal's waters. Even small changes in water chemistry can have significant effects on the microscopic organisms that keep the lake clear and healthy. Industrial activities in the broader region, while carefully regulated, still present potential risks to the lake's pristine condition. The memory of past industrial threats, particularly the paper mill that once discharged waste into the lake's waters, serves as a reminder of how quickly human activities can affect even the most massive and seemingly resilient natural systems. The Baikalsk Pulp and Paper Mill, which operated from 1966 to 2013, represents both a cautionary tale and a success story in the history of Lake Baikal's protection. The mill discharged treated wastewater directly into the lake for decades, introducing pollutants that had never before existed in Baikal's pristine waters. Environmental activists, scientists, and concerned citizens fought for decades to close the mill, finally succeeding in 2013. The closure of that mill, achieved through the dedicated efforts of environmental activists and concerned scientists, represents one of the great conservation victories of the modern environmental movement. It demonstrated that even powerful industrial interests can be held accountable when their activities threaten irreplaceable natural treasures, and it showed that public pressure, scientific evidence, and political action can combine to protect the environment. Air pollution, carried by atmospheric currents from distant industrial centers, represents a more subtle but persistent challenge. Even in the remote wilderness of Siberia, Lake Baikal is not completely isolated from the global atmosphere, and pollutants can travel vast distances before settling into the lake's watershed. Monitoring systems around the lake work constantly to track these inputs and assess their potential impacts on the lake's ecosystem. Scientists have detected traces of industrial pollutants that originated hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away, carried to Lake Baikal by wind currents and atmospheric circulation patterns. While the levels of these pollutants are still very low, their mere presence in this pristine environment is a reminder that no place on Earth is completely isolated from human activity. The atmosphere connects all parts of our planet, meaning that pollution released anywhere can potentially affect even the most remote and protected places. The introduction of non-native species, whether accidental or intentional, poses another ongoing challenge for Lake Baikal's unique ecosystem. The lake's isolated evolution has created a community of organisms so perfectly adapted to their specific environment that they may be particularly vulnerable to competition from invasive species. The careful monitoring of ship traffic and recreational activities helps prevent the accidental introduction of organisms from other water bodies, but constant vigilance is required to maintain the biological integrity that makes Baikal so special. Even microscopic organisms hitchhiking on boat hulls or fishing equipment could potentially establish populations in the lake and disrupt the delicate balance that has evolved over millions of years. Invasive species represent a particularly insidious threat because their effects can be irreversible. Once a non-native species establishes itself in an ecosystem, it can be extremely difficult or impossible to remove. The unique species of Lake Baikal, having evolved in isolation, may lack the defenses necessary to compete with invasive species, that have evolved in more competitive environments. Yet even as we acknowledge these challenges, it's important to recognize the remarkable success stories that demonstrate humanity's capacity to act as effective stewards of precious natural places. The designation of Lake Baikal as a UNESCO World Heritage Site has provided international recognition and protection for the lake's unique values. This designation brings with it not just prestige, but concrete commitments to monitoring and protecting the lake's ecosystem. The UNESCO designation requires regular reporting on the lake's condition and the measures being taken to protect it. This creates international accountability for the lake's stewardship and provides a framework for coordinated conservation efforts. The designation also helps attract international funding and expertise for research and conservation projects. The scientific research being conducted around Lake Baikal represents one of the most comprehensive studies of any freshwater ecosystem in the world. Teams of researchers from around the globe collaborate to understand every aspect of the lake's functioning, from its microscopic organisms to its weather patterns, from its geological processes to its cultural significance. This research provides the knowledge base necessary for making informed decisions about the lake's protection and management. Scientists study everything from the effects of climate change on ice formation to the genetic diversity of endemic species, from water quality monitoring to the effectiveness of conservation measures. The Limnological Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences, located in Irkutsk near Lake Baikal, serves as a hub for much of this research. Scientists there maintain long-term monitoring programs that track changes in the lake's ecosystem, providing early warning of potential problems and documenting the effectiveness of conservation efforts. Local communities around Lake Baikal have emerged as some of the most effective guardians of the lake's health. Drawing on both traditional knowledge passed down through generations and modern scientific understanding, these communities have developed sustainable practices that allow them to benefit from the lake's resources while maintaining its ecological integrity. Their intimate knowledge of local conditions and their deep cultural connection to the lake make them ideal partners in conservation efforts. Local fishermen know when fish populations are healthy and when they're under stress. Local guides can read weather patterns and water conditions with extraordinary accuracy. Local residents are often the first to notice changes in the lake's condition. The integration of traditional ecological knowledge with modern scientific methods creates a more complete understanding of the lake's ecosystem than either approach could provide alone. Indigenous peoples have been observing and interacting with Lake Baikal for thousands of years, accumulating knowledge about its patterns and processes that complements the shorter-term but more detailed observations of modern science. Environmental education programs around Lake Baikal are creating new generations of people who understand both the lake's extraordinary value and the challenges it faces. School children in the region learn about the lake's unique biology and geology, but they also learn about their own role as stewards of this global treasure. These educational efforts extend far beyond the local region, reaching people around the world who may never visit Lake Baikal, but who can contribute to its protection through their support for conservation efforts and their own environmental choices. Online educational resources, documentary films, and cultural exchanges help spread awareness of the lake's importance and the need for its protection. Many schools around Lake Baikal have developed programs that connect students directly with ongoing research and conservation efforts. Students participate in water quality monitoring, wildlife surveys, and habitat restoration projects, giving them hands-on experience in environmental stewardship while contributing valuable data to scientific research. International cooperation has proven essential in addressing challenges that cross national boundaries. Climate change and atmospheric pollution don't respect political borders, and protecting Lake Baikal requires coordination between multiple countries and international organizations. The collaborative research efforts and shared monitoring systems that have been developed around the lake serve as models for international environmental cooperation. Scientists from Russia, Japan, the United States, Germany, and many other countries work together on Lake Baikal research, sharing data, expertise, and resources. These international partnerships have led to major scientific discoveries and conservation innovations that benefit not just Lake Baikal, but freshwater ecosystems around the world. Research techniques developed for studying Baikal's unique ecosystem have been adapted for use in other lakes, while conservation strategies proven effective at Baikal have been implemented in other protected areas. The development of sustainable technologies specifically designed for the Baikal region represents another hopeful trend. Solar and wind power systems that can function in Siberian conditions, waste treatment systems that protect water quality, and transportation systems that minimize environmental impact all contribute to reducing human pressures on the lake's ecosystem. Some of the most innovative environmental technologies in the world are being tested and implemented around Lake Baikal. The extreme conditions of the Siberian environment and the need to protect such a sensitive ecosystem drive innovation in everything from renewable energy systems to water purification technologies. Local communities have been early adopters of many sustainable technologies, recognizing that their long-term well-being depends on maintaining the health of the lake ecosystem. Solar panels and wind turbines now power remote research stations and tourist facilities, while advanced waste treatment systems ensure that human activities don't contaminate the lake's waters. Perhaps most encouraging is the growing recognition that protecting Lake Baikal is not just about preserving a single lake, but about maintaining the kind of healthy relationship between human society and the natural world that will be essential for our species' long-term survival. The lessons learned from protecting Baikal, about international cooperation, about balancing human needs with ecological integrity, about the value of combining traditional knowledge with modern science, have applications far beyond the shores of this one extraordinary lake. Lake Baikal serves as a laboratory for developing and testing approaches to environmental protection that can be applied to other threatened ecosystems around the world. The challenges facing Lake Baikal mirror those facing many other natural areas around the world: climate change, pollution, invasive species, and the pressures of human development. The solutions being developed for Baikal, from scientific monitoring systems to community-based conservation programs to international cooperation agreements, provide models that can be adapted for use in other places. The resilience that Lake Baikal has shown over millions of years provides reason for optimism about its ability to adapt to current challenges, provided that human communities remain committed to acting as responsible stewards rather than merely extractive users. The lake has survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions, tectonic shifts, and climate variations that dwarf current changes. Its extraordinary depth and volume provide buffers against environmental changes that smaller lakes lack. Its unique ecosystem, while vulnerable to disruption, also demonstrates remarkable resilience and adaptability. The key to the lake's continued health lies in human recognition of our role as stewards rather than masters of the natural world. When human activities are guided by respect for natural systems and long-term thinking about sustainability, even ancient and delicate ecosystems like Lake Baikal can continue to thrive in a human-dominated world. As we contemplate the future of this ancient lake, we can draw inspiration from its own example of patience and persistence. Just as Lake Baikal has maintained its essential character while adapting to countless changes over geological time, so too can human communities learn to adapt their practices in ways that honor both their own needs and the needs of the natural systems that sustain all life on Earth. The challenges are real, but so too is the capacity for wisdom, cooperation, and care that can ensure that future generations will also be able to rest beside these ancient waters and find in them the same peace, beauty, and wonder that have moved human hearts for thousands of years. The story of Lake Baikal's protection is still being written, and each of us who cares about this remarkable place has the opportunity to contribute to a positive ending. In the gentle light of evening settling over Lake Baikal's waters, we can envision a future where this remarkable place continues to serve as a mirror of the sky, a home for unique life forms, and a source of inspiration for human communities that understand their role as guardians of Earth's most precious treasures. The work of protection requires both local action and global awareness, both scientific understanding and spiritual reverence, both immediate practical measures and long-term vision. But if there's any place on Earth worth the effort required for such comprehensive protection, it's surely this ancient lake that holds within its depths both the memory of our planet's past and the hope for its future. As our gentle journey around Lake Baikal draws to its close, I invite you to settle even deeper into whatever comfortable space you've found for this evening's exploration. Let your breathing slow and deepen as we take one last, lingering look at this extraordinary lake that has shared its secrets with us through these quiet hours together. Picture yourself now sitting on a smooth stone beside Lake Baikal's shore as the last light of day begins to fade into the deep blue of a Siberian evening. The water before you is perfectly still, so mirror-like that you can no longer tell where the lake ends and the sky begins. Above you, the first stars are beginning to appear, and as they do, they appear twice, once in the heavens above, and once in the perfect reflection of the lake's surface below. The air around you carries the gentle scent of pine and fresh water, that clean, wild fragrance that speaks of places where nature still reigns supreme. In the distance, you might hear the soft call of a loon echoing across the water, or the gentle splash of a Nerpa seal surfacing to breathe in the evening calm. These sounds don't disturb the silence. They enhance it, adding layers of natural music to the profound quiet that surrounds this ancient place. This is the magic of Lake Baikal that will stay with us long after our journey ends. This sense of existing between two worlds, suspended between earth and sky, held gently in a place where time moves differently, where patience is measured in millions of years, and where every drop of water carries within it the memory of countless seasons, countless storms, countless quiet evenings just like this one. Think for a moment about the incredible story we've traced together. We've traveled back through 25 million years to witness the gentle birth of this lake, formed not through violent cataclysm, but through the Earth's patient stretching, creating space for something magnificent to grow. We've watched as tectonic forces, working with the deliberate care of a master sculptor, carved out the depression that would become the world's deepest and oldest lake. We've floated on waters so clear they seem like liquid air, beneath skies so perfectly reflected that reality and reflection become one seamless whole. We've witnessed the seasonal transformations that turn this liquid mirror into a crystal palace of ice, where frozen formations create art that would humble any human sculptor. We've seen how light plays across these waters in ways that seem almost supernatural, creating mirages and reflections that blur the boundaries between the physical and the mystical. We've descended into depths that challenge our understanding of what fresh water can hold, depths that contain a fifth of all the unfrozen fresh water on our planet, depths where unique creatures live in eternal darkness, depths where the pressure and cold have created conditions unlike anywhere else on Earth. We've explored underwater worlds where ancient water circulates in currents so gentle they're like the lake's own form of breathing, carrying with them the stories of millions of years. We've met the gentle Nerpa seals, those whiskered ambassadors of Baikal's waters, and the transparent Golomyanka fish that rise and fall with the rhythms of day and night like living music in the lake's crystal depths. We've marveled at the extraordinary diversity of life that has evolved in these waters, more than 2,500 species, 2/3 of which exist nowhere else on Earth, each one a unique chapter in the ongoing story of evolution. We've listened to the whispers of cultures that have recognized this lake as sacred for thousands of years, understanding intuitively what science has now confirmed, that some places on Earth are more than mere geography, that some waters hold reflections not just of clouds and sky, but of the deepest aspects of existence itself. The Buryat people's ancient wisdom, their stories of goddesses weeping tears that became this sacred lake, speaks to a recognition that goes beyond mere description to true understanding. And we've acknowledged, with both honesty and hope, that even this ancient giant faces challenges in our changing world. But we've also seen how human wisdom, when combined with scientific knowledge and genuine care, can serve as a force for protection and healing. The story of Lake Baikal is not just a story of natural wonder. It's a story of what becomes possible when we recognize ourselves as participants in the Earth story, rather than separate from it. As you sit here beside these imagined waters, feeling the gentle coolness of the evening air and hearing the soft lapping of waves that have been caressing these shores for millions of years, you might notice that something has shifted within you during our time together. Perhaps it's a sense of perspective, an awareness of the vast scales of time and space that dwarf our daily concerns while simultaneously making them more precious. This shift in perspective is one of the greatest gifts that places like Lake Baikal offer to those who take the time to truly encounter them. In our fast-paced world, where we measure success in quarterly reports and plan our lives in 5-year increments, there's something profoundly healing about contemplating a lake that has been growing, slowly and steadily, for 25 million years. Perhaps what you're feeling is a sense of connection, a recognition that we are part of something much larger and older and more beautiful than we often remember in our busy lives. The Nerpa seal that surfaces near the shore and regards you with ancient, knowing eyes is connected to you by millions of years of shared evolutionary history. The microscopic creatures that keep these waters clear are your partners in maintaining the conditions that make life possible on Earth. The Buryat shamans who left prayer flags on the trees around the lake were engaging in the same fundamental human activity you're engaging in right now, recognizing the sacred in the natural world and feeling grateful for the privilege of being alive in such an extraordinary universe. Their colorful ribbons fluttering in the breeze around the lake are like physical manifestations of the same sense of wonder and reverence that you're feeling as you contemplate these ancient waters. This connection isn't just poetic metaphor, it's literal truth. The water cycle that brings moisture from Lake Baikal into the atmosphere eventually carries that water around the globe. Some of the water molecules that evaporate from Baikal's surface might eventually fall as rain in your own hometown, connecting you physically to this distant lake. The oxygen released by the lake's microscopic plants contributes to the atmosphere we all breathe, making Lake Baikal literally a part of the life support system that sustains us all. As the stars grow brighter above Lake Baikal and their reflections grow clearer in the water below, you might find yourself thinking about your own life differently. The challenges you face, the relationships you cherish, the work you do, the dreams you carry, all of these exist within the context of this vast, ancient, beautiful world. They are part of the continuing story of consciousness awakening to itself on a planet that has been patiently creating conditions for awareness and wonder for billions of years. This broader perspective doesn't diminish the importance of your personal experiences. Rather, it places them within a larger context that can be both humbling and empowering. You are not just an isolated individual struggling alone with life's challenges, but a participant in the ongoing story of life on Earth, connected to everything from the smallest microscopic organisms to the vast circulation patterns of the planet's atmosphere and oceans. The gentle lapping of waves against the shore creates a rhythm that seems to synchronize with your own heartbeat, reminding you that you are not separate from nature, but a part of it, one expression of the Earth's long experiment with life and consciousness. Your breath joins the great breathing of the planet, the circulation of water between ocean and sky, the photosynthesis of plants converting carbon dioxide to oxygen, the slow circulation of currents in the depths of ancient lakes. In this state of deep connection and peace, you might find that the boundaries between yourself and the world around you begin to soften. You are not just observing Lake Baikal, you are participating in it, part of the same great web of existence that includes the seals and the fish, the microscopic creatures and the ancient waters, the surrounding mountains and the stars reflected in the lake's surface. This dissolution of boundaries is what mystics throughout history have described as the ultimate spiritual experience, the recognition that the separation between self and world is largely an illusion, that we are all part of one vast, interconnected whole. Lake Baikal, with its perfect reflections that make it impossible to tell where water ends and sky begins, serves as a natural mandala for this profound realization. This is the deepest teaching that places like Lake Baikal offer, not just knowledge about geology or biology or ecology, but a direct experience of belonging, of being at home in the universe. When we truly encounter the natural world, we discover that we are not strangers in a foreign land, but children returning to a home we had forgotten we knew. The indigenous peoples who lived around Lake Baikal understood this intuitively. Their recognition of the lake as sacred wasn't based on abstract theological concepts, but on direct experience of their connection to this place. They understood that their well-being and the lake's well-being were inseparable, that caring for the lake was literally caring for themselves and their descendants. This understanding is desperately needed in our modern world, where we often feel disconnected from the natural systems that sustain us. Lake Baikal reminds us that we are not separate from nature, but embedded within it, that our health and happiness depend on the health of the ecosystems we're part of. As we prepare to leave this peaceful shore and return to the landscapes of sleep and dreams, take a moment to express gratitude. Gratitude for the ancient forces that created this remarkable lake. Gratitude for the countless organisms that maintain its clarity and beauty. Gratitude for the indigenous peoples who recognized its sacred nature. Gratitude for the scientists and conservationists who work to protect it. Express gratitude for your own capacity to be moved by beauty and wonder, for your ability to find peace in contemplating the natural world, for the privilege of being alive at a time when you can learn about and appreciate places like Lake Baikal. This capacity for wonder and gratitude is one of the most precious gifts of human consciousness, and it's what makes us capable of being good stewards of the Earth's treasures. If this journey has brought you peace, if it has reminded you of the extraordinary world we inhabit, if it has helped you find that quiet place within yourself where wonder and gratitude meet, then I hope you'll consider sharing this experience with others who might benefit from such peaceful explorations. A gentle subscription to our channel ensures you'll be notified whenever we set out on another of these tranquil journeys, and a soft tap on the like button helps other tired souls discover these oases of calm in our busy world. But more than that, I hope you'll carry something of Lake Baikal's wisdom into your daily life. Its patience, its clarity, its ability to reflect the beauty of the world around it. Share the wonder you've experienced here with friends and family. Let them know about this ancient lake that holds a fifth of the world's fresh water, that serves as home to species found nowhere else on Earth, that has been sacred to indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Help others discover the peace that comes from contemplating the natural world and our place within it. Perhaps most importantly, carry something of Lake Baikal's peace with you into your waking life. When you encounter challenges, remember the patience of waters that have been flowing for 25 million years. When you feel overwhelmed by the pace of change, remember the gentle rhythms of seasonal transformation around an ancient lake. When you feel disconnected from the natural world, remember the reflection of stars in still water, and know that you are part of the same vast, beautiful, interconnected web of existence. Let the clarity of Lake Baikal's waters inspire clarity in your own thinking and decision-making. Let the lake's depth remind you that there are always deeper layers to explore in every situation, every relationship, every problem you face. Let the lake's resilience give you strength to persist through difficulties, knowing that the most beautiful and enduring things in life often require patience and time to develop fully. The conservation challenges facing Lake Baikal remind us that even the most ancient and seemingly permanent things require our active care and protection. In the same way, the things we value most in our own lives, our relationships, our communities, our personal growth, require ongoing attention and nurturing. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler. May your sleep be as peaceful as the depths of Lake Baikal. May your dreams be as clear as its crystalline waters, and may you wake tomorrow with something of its ancient serenity flowing gently through your day. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey to one of Earth's most sacred places. Until we meet again beside another peaceful shore, rest well in the knowledge that you are part of something ancient, beautiful, and endlessly worthy of wonder. You are connected to every drop of water in Lake Baikal, to every star reflected in its surface, to every creature that calls it home. You are part of the ongoing story of life on Earth, a story that includes this remarkable lake and all the wonders we've discovered together. The stars above Lake Baikal shine on, their light traveling across vast distances to dance on waters that have been dancing with starlight for millions of years. In this eternal dance of light and water, of earth and sky, of time and timelessness, we find our own place in the grand story of existence, not as observers looking in from the outside, but as participants in the ongoing miracle of consciousness, awakening to beauty in an endlessly generous universe. As you drift toward sleep, carried by the memory of gentle waves lapping against ancient shores, remember that Lake Baikal continues its patient existence, holding its sacred waters under the star-lit sky of Siberia. Its depths continue to harbor their mysterious creatures. Its surface continues to reflect the heavens above. Its shores continue to welcome pilgrims seeking peace and connection with the natural world. And somewhere in those depths, in the slow circulation of ancient waters, in the patient work of microscopic creatures maintaining the lake's crystal clarity, in the gentle breathing of sleeping seals, there flows a current of peace that connects all things, that reminds us that we are never truly alone, that we are always held in the embrace of something larger and more loving than we can fully comprehend. Rest now, carried by the gentle currents of Lake Baikal's peace, floating between the reflection of stars and the stars themselves, held safely in the vast, patient embrace of waters that have known the secret of serenity for 25 million years. In this ancient cradle of time and mystery, find the rest your soul has been seeking, and wake tomorrow renewed by the timeless wisdom of Earth's oldest lake.